trip on it that much because I'd never really seen him because there wasn't much TV. I'd heard him on the radio a lot because we were doing this project. And I listened to this guy, and I'm sorry, man. Since the topic's politically incorrectness, he sounds like a mafia accountant. He sounds like that middleman that's with the mob guys. That's hey,
I think that New York accent doesn't help.
If you don't pay up, something's gonna happen to your kneecaps.
You're right. You're right.
He just strikes me as and like all these people from South City. Dr. Fauci's the smartest man in the world. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well, you mentioned the whole politically incorrect thing, and in some ways, one of the funniest guys on radio right now is Rush Limbaugh. Still, always has been, and it's not so much his topics, but it's just the little things that he throws in now. Like when he talks about Dr. Fauci, he doesn't say Dr. Fauci. He says Dr. Fauci with that super exaggerated Italian.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure some people have canceled him. Wow, you're making fun of his ethnicity. Well, yeah, you kind of are. But I listened to that, and I thought it was funny.
It's funny.
I think it's funny. I mean, is it
Dr. Fauci?
Dr. Fauci.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so Rush Limbaugh is probably the last big-name funny white guy since, Carlin. And I can't think of a really big white male comic since Carlin.
There's a comic out there who I like. There's two of them. One's a Hispanic guy. I guess you really can't call him a white guy. Joey Diaz is funny, is hilarious.
Yeah, he's
more of an actor now too, though.
Yeah, but he's been claimed by the Latinos, so you can't.
Right.
You white guys can't claim him.
Ron White is funny. He is
funny. I don't see him a lot.
I don't
featured.
Either. Here, you know what? And let me take this back. I don't see his stand-up so much. I listen to him. I've heard him twice on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's hilarious. He makes me just roll in the aisle laugh just by the stuff that he says. He's a storyteller, and when he tells these stories, but you're right. There's not a ton of them out there, and I wonder if it's because they're thinking, here's a good joke. Nah, I'm a white guy.
That's 100% the reason, because white men right now, the prevailing intellectual, and this isn't just colleges, this is now going to the high schools. And it screwed up the high school I went to, U City, which was a great high school. Now it's barely, white people don't go there. A lot of black folks don't want to send their kids there, because, and I saw it in the 80s, late 80s, where it's just like in everything white male is bad, which is, again, partly getting into what my book is about. Like, why'd you make your main character a white guy? You're a black dude. It's like, well, there's a reason. And the question I'm asking is, can you, a white man, James Strong, and me, a black man, Jay, and a black woman over here and a homosexual Japanese person over here or whatever, can we come together and be closer in our ideology or closer in our mission or closer in our ideals and closer in our sense of tyranny? Or do I still have to consider myself closer to the Black Caucus, who didn't do a goddamn thing about black people being killed in nursing homes because Dr. Cuomo or Mario Cuomo, I call him Dr. Cuomo because he somehow became a doctor for 4 months, decided that it was a good idea to stick people back in nursing homes, predominantly black and brown nursing homes were hit harder. Mm-hmm. But I'm still supposed to say that me and Hakeem Jeffries are automatically, by the essence of our reality, closer to each other than I can be to you, even though I watch Hakeem Jeffries specifically say he knew the shutdown did not help people who living in those high-rises and still supported it.
Well, the answer to your question, the obvious answer to your question, it's obvious to me anyway. And I made this statement. I've made this statement to you. I've made this statement on this podcast. I've made this statement for a long, long time. And it's a fact that people are more comfortable around those who are more like them. Okay? But to me, it's not what you look like.
Right.
To me, it's what you stand for. It's what you believe. It's what you enjoy. If you have two guys, one likes basketball and one likes hockey. Okay, they're normally played at the same time, so maybe they're not going to get along because he wants to talk about hockey, he wants to talk about basketball. But if you get two guys who are both big basketball fans, it doesn't matter what the color of their skin is, or even if they're men or women. That the common thread is we like basketball, or we like hockey, or we like hunting, or we like bike riding, or we like fill in the blank. This little neighborhood we have around here is more diverse than you would think, but everybody in this neighborhood gets along because everybody in this neighborhood kind of thinks about the same way. They kind of want to be close to the city because there's stuff happening, but they want to be out here because it's nice and peaceful and it's quiet, and we all like the same things. Some are young, some are old, some are black, some are white, some are this, some are that, but we all think the same way, so we all get along. It shouldn't be, and because America is, there's no country that's close to us that is so diverse. And we keep talking about all the racial strife that we have in this country. In my opinion, we should be celebrating the fact that we are the most diverse society ever and the most financially successful.
The racial strife is on MSNBC and Fox News.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. But for some reason, we concentrate on this and not that.
Goes back to what we were talking about before. Control.
Yeah.
Goes back to why you can't have fun and tell jokes anymore.
Yeah.
Control. Which is why your great black comedians, your great stand-up comedians are now black folks. Why? Because, and not to say, I mean, black women historically got the worst part of the race thing. But the focus of controlling black people was predominantly on black men. I mean, just going through history. It's like when people wanted to talk about slavery, the whole concept, the focus would be on breaking down the legitimacy, the strength, the manhood of a black male. So and I'll say this straight up, and this is politically incorrect, black men politically overall are more resistant to government control than black women politically overall.
Well, men are more resistant to being controlled than women. I mean, that's not a black or white thing. That's a male and female thing.
Well, it is, but you're right because statistically speaking, white men vote for less government than black. Statistically. But what I'm saying is that you're not seeing, other than Tiffany Haddish, you're not seeing a lot of black women. Well-known stand-up comics. Historically speaking, though, there is a difference. There is a difference when you talk about control. I will say this: there is a difference in the experience as far as black male historically, in the sense that the imperative of freedom for black people up until very recently in history was a little different. Black people weren't allowed to vote to 1965. And like you said, Richard Pryor would not have been able to say those things 20 years before.
No, it wouldn't have been allowed.
But white guys could make jokes about black people, and we're making it.
That's exactly right.
So there's a certain extra thing, and the difference is black folks aren't particularly voting for, black men aren't, statistically speaking, aren't voting for Republicans a lot. So there's this sort of middle space that black men tend to occupy. And the media tries to say, oh, well, all these black people voting Democrat. And that's a very broad space thing. But they're not voting for Bernie Sanders for the most part. They're not voting for Megan Green. In fact, Cory Bush won because white people on the 15th War, middle class and upper middle class white people, outvoted the black people who wanted Clay. So they make it like, oh, this black woman won. She won because she was the choice of the white people where I live. It's a lot more complicated than people are really talking about.
Well, there's two thoughts on that. I also heard that people were tired of the Clays because the Clays have been in charge of the first congressional district since the early 60s. William Bill Clay and then Lacey Clay. And they figure they put Bush in there because now she won't have any power and they've taken the power away from that war, which Lacey Clay had a lot of power. What do you think about that?
I think that those two things are not unrelated. Like you say, when you looked at the returns, the more black communities went for Clay substantially, but their turnout was 20% lower than East Tower Grove. It was East Tower Grove and 15th Ward that pushed her over.
Because Bush took those overwhelmingly?
Overwhelmingly, and their turnout was higher. They all came out to get Bush in there. Another thing, I met Cori Bush, very intelligent. But the first thing she said, I saw her on MSNBC, and she says, one of the silliest things I've ever heard a progressive say, and that's saying a lot, because I think their economics are just awful. She says, and this isn't a lot, she knows she's just trying to play to that AOC crowd. Mm-hmm. She says, I don't see why people can't get paid $15 an hour when we're spending $80,000 a person in Tent City for prisoners.
What?
That's what she said. She says because we're spending so much on per prisoner in Tent City in Arizona that we should be able to pay everyone $15 an hour.
Well, and that's the whole progressive thing. I mean, once upon a time, when you had the old school conservatives and the old school liberals, I'm talking about the Goldwater conservatives and the Kennedy liberals, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's be real honest. I don't care what your politics were, but if you want to go out on a Saturday night, would you rather go out with Barry Goldwater or JFK? Let's be honest.
Definitely JFK.
Oh, absolutely. You'd be the good booze, the good girls, the fast cars. In Goldwater, you'd probably sit around and play gin rummy, okay? Yeah. Liberals were the fun ones. Conservatives were the stodgy old businessmen. Mm-hmm. That's the way things used to be.
But and liberals are different because JFK as a liberal is way different than the liberals today, like Nancy Pelosi.
Well, I purposely use the term liberal because now, if I look at so many of my, in air quotes, conservative friends, mm-hmm. okay, and I even kind of put myself mm-hmm. in that category, whereas I don't want to say we've changed our minds or flip-flopped, but conservatives have, I will say they've evolved, okay? I know of no conservatives who don't think that discriminating against a person because they're homosexual is wrong.
Right.
They all think that.
It definitely changed on that.
Yes, definitely. And I don't think it's because all of a sudden they've had a change of heart. Right. I think now that it's like you said with Aretha Franklin or with or black entertainers. Wow, I never knew black people before. I know 3 of them now, and you know what? They're just like me, except for they choose a different partner.
Right.
And they're educated. They're not ignorant anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think as people understand, as they're introduced to that, and as they understand more, they get it. Mm-hmm. And so many conservatives, economically, still the same way. Mm-hmm. But they would be considered a social liberal today. But really, it's what was a social liberal 30, 40 years ago is now a centrist.
But most of the conservatives I know, one thing I've seen, they've abandoned a lot of the economic principled ideals. I noticed that. I noticed a lot of people call themselves conservatives.
Like, what do you mean?
I mean, like they go off on people for making. They go off on certain people for making money if they don't like them, or they're against certain types of, partly is because of the thing with Trump and the free trade thing, which I can understand because I've actually come around to agree with him on certain things with China. Now,
Now, are you talking about not so much an eat the rich mentality, but how much money do you need mentality?
I'm saying that there are people who are a lot of conservatives now are going off on economic inequality, but not like in a way that a libertarian does. Because there's 2 ways. Like there's libertarians who go off on economic inequality that's caused by the government taking from the private sector and giving, and I'm in that category. But there's certain people that are like, oh, well, this person makes this much, and they're doing this great job, and this person over here is making $2 million a year, and they're only doing this. And to me, that's not a conservative value because